Tonight, the price of Bitcoin is testing to the downside. We are now touching prices around 61,000. We haven't seen prices this low since about 10 days ago, so it's not really all too critical, though of course across social media people are getting a little bit fearful. Now, one thing I want to make clear is that Bitcoin's structure is still maintaining its integrity. If we're looking at these previous areas to the left where we created that top earlier this year, Bitcoin is basically holding above these previous resistance areas, and so far that previous resistance is now the new support of this range. We've actually flipped it into new support. So previous resistance has now pivoted as a new support zone. So overall, Bitcoin is still maintaining its structural integrity, guys. There's no major damage done to the trend. And if you're looking at these higher lows, basically from July going up to October here, these higher lows right here, we're still well above that trend line. So technically Bitcoin could, if it wanted to, look to trade sideways for a little bit longer before running up, and we would still maintain the structural integrity of the trend, and everything would technically still be fine. And all of this little movement in the short term is just noise, unimportant, and it's not really to be nothing to really be concerned of, in my opinion, as long as we're maintaining previous resistance as new support. I'm really not too worried here. When would I get worried? It's when Bitcoin trades sideways, pulls back to this trend line, and then breaks down. That's when I would say, okay, we have some structural damage taking place, but anything taking a place above this area, you know, that is constructive price action, right, along this trend line. This is all constructive. We're maintaining an upward sloping trend line, a macro upward sloping trend line. You know, everything above this area would be maintained. That's all good to go. No worries there, guys. Really, in my opinion, so far, so good. Nothing to really worry about. The next thing I want to dive into is the on-chain metrics. Something that I just posted on Twitter earlier today was the revived supply of the last 5 years with the 7-day moving average. If you're looking at this chart, the area that I circled first is at the 20K zone. When we saw the revived supply metric move up this intensely back at 20,000, what was it actually telling us? It was telling us that whales were preparing to exit the market. But that didn't mean it was the top. It meant that they were getting ready. They were moving crypto to prepare to sell, right? And we went from 20,000 all the way to 65. And since then, we've seen a major cool off in this metric, all the way down to these low levels. And now today, or recently, I should say, boom, we're all the way up, seeing a huge spike in this metric once again, you know, almost similar to that point at 20,000. And what does this tell us? Well, in my opinion, you know, just like 20,000 was the all-time high at that point in time, now we're up here at this current all-time high area. It's telling me that the whales are preparing to sell into strength, right? That's what I said in this tweet. Whales sell into strength, right? So the whales want to be selling into the strength of the trend. So they get their Bitcoin moved right at that 20K point, and they start to sell into the pump. And a metric that backs up that claim that whales sell into strength is Willy Woo's long-term holder supply shock. And every time we see a major pump for Bitcoin, multi-month or year-long pump, we see a huge decline in the supply shock metric, right? That area, we moved up, right? Just like 2017, all year long, major dump in the supply shock, major move up in price. Every time we hit these high points for peak accumulation, we're at a low point in price. High point for peak accumulation, low point in price. Currently, the whales clearly are telling us that this is a low point in price, and that once this peak accumulation line starts to trend down, that's when we're going to see a huge pump, because whales want to sell into strength, right? That's what all of this means, guys. And also, the long-term holder net position change is starting to move into the red. We're starting to see that the whales are getting ready to sell and are starting to sell. And this is actually not a bad thing. Looking back in time, in October, when we were sitting at, what was it, like 13K or something, the whales started to sell into strength, into the pump, right? And now we're starting to see that once again right over here. This means, guys, that we're setting up for a major pump despite this little, you know, short-term dip, right? all this little stuff happening here, we're already been at these prices for like weeks. So it's really, nothing's really changed. We're kind of just consolidating at the previous all-time high, in my opinion, waiting for a major pump. And there's so many on-chain metrics, including the MVRV Z-score, which is sitting down here at a low level. Usually when we end a cycle, we're at a much higher point. So the MVRV has a lot of room to move up before the end of the cycle. Looking at the Mayer multiple, we usually end the cycle up here at like a 3.5 or a 2.5, but we're currently all the way down here, nowhere near those levels. Mayer multiple has room to move up. Also, the PUAL multiple sitting at a really low level here. We usually end at a 5 or a 2.5, right? And we're sitting down here, really low level, ready to move up, guys. All the on-chain metrics say we have room to move up. Everything that I just showed you proves that we do have room to move up. Despite the short-term noise, I think everything's fine. And interestingly enough, you guys know that I was the first channel on YouTube to predict the 3 peaks in a domed house chart pattern to play out. We were the first channel on Twitter, YouTube, everywhere on social media to predict down here at the bottom of this bearish run that Bitcoin was going to play out this pattern. So far, so good. So far, it's accurate. And even though that this picture right here is a few days old, right? It's a little bit old. We've had a little bit of action here. Regardless, if you're looking at Bitcoin, this just sideways action along the previous all-time high, what does that look like to you guys? It looks like, if you're looking up here, the first floor. It looks like the first floor of the 3 peaks in a domed house pattern. And we are currently perfectly on track to play out this next major move up. And this chart compares it to the gold 2011 chart. Bitcoin is still forming that first floor. If you look at gold in 2011, we spent a lot of time going sideways at this first floor. Bitcoin's kind of just doing the same thing. I think that this model is super valid and it's very likely going to take place. And I think that, you know, with what I just showed you, all the on-chain metrics, everything we've been talking about, I think, you know, this little downside move should probably just be considered noise. All the on-chain metrics point to higher prices. You know, regardless of what Bitcoin does in the short term, it doesn't really matter to me. I'm looking for much higher prices, 6 figures, possibly by the end of the year, maybe going into the first quarter of 2022. But that's it for me today, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.